Now, before we go any deeper into the signs and behaviors, we need to understand what we're really talking about when we say demons hidden in friends and family. It's easy to get carried away with the language, to think we're only talking about red-eyed supernatural creatures. But that's not the point here. If you go into this subject looking for monsters with horns, you're going to miss the real danger standing right next to you, smiling, offering help, even offering love. The most dangerous demons don't appear evil. They appear familiar. You see throughout history, and not just in the Bible, but in psychology, literature, and philosophy. There's always been an understanding that evil doesn't come crashing in through the front door. It sneaks in the back. It wears disguises. It operates through people who may not even know they're being used. And that's where this gets uncomfortable. Because sometimes the very people closest to you can be the vessels through which spiritual corruption enters your life. Now let me make something very clear. Not everyone who hurts you is demon-possessed. Not everyone who lies to you is evil. People are flawed. We all are. But there is a distinct difference between human weakness and active darkness. And learning to tell the difference is what spiritual maturity is all about. William Branham used to say, "The spirit in a man will declare him." That means no matter how good someone looks on the outside, how clean their suit, how nice their tone, the spirit operating through them will eventually reveal its true nature. But you've got to be watching. You've got to be discerning. The problem is, most of us are trained not to see. We're conditioned to keep the peace, to look the other way, to make excuses for those we love. And in doing so, we let the serpent into the garden. That serpent may be charming, helpful, even sacrificial, but it's still a serpent. And if we're not paying attention, it can lead us down paths we were never meant to walk. Philosophically speaking, evil is often hidden in what psychologists call shadow behavior, the parts of a person they don't acknowledge or are even unaware of. Carl Jung talked about this. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Now think about that in spiritual terms. How many people are being used by darkness without even knowing it? How many family members are influenced by bitterness, jealousy, addiction, pride, spirits they've never confronted? And how many of us excuse it because it's coming from someone we love? That's the trap. The emotional attachment keeps us from seeing clearly. We say, "But that's my brother, that's my mother, that's my friend since childhood." Yes. And demons don't care. In fact, they prefer to hide behind someone you trust because that trust becomes their camouflage. And by the time you realize the damage being done, the roots have already grown deep. That's why this first step, understanding what these demons are and how they operate, is so critical. It's not just about recognizing evil in strangers or the news or the world out there. It's about being spiritually awake in the places closest to home. So I'm not asking you to start accusing everyone in your life. I'm asking you to look deeper, to stop judging only by appearances, to recognize that sometimes the enemy doesn't look like the enemy. Sometimes it looks like a friend. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Now, once you've come to understand what you're really dealing with, not just flesh and blood, but something working through people, then the next question becomes, how do you spot it? What does it actually look like in daily life? How does this hidden influence show up? Not in fantasy or folklore, but in your own living room, your own relationships. I want you to pay attention to something very specific, the consistent draining of your energy and the presence of confusion or chaos that follows certain people around like a shadow. This is one of the most reliable ways to detect demonic influence, especially in close relationships. It's not about a single bad day. It's not about someone being difficult once in a while. We're talking about patterns, repetition, cycles that always seem to end the same way, where you walk away exhausted, confused, guilty, smaller than you were before. That's not just human dysfunction. That's a signature. That's a spiritual fingerprint. Demons feed on energy, emotional, spiritual, psychological. They operate through people who are open to being used, often without realizing it. And their goal is always the same: to pull you out of alignment with peace, purpose, and clarity. That's the battlefield, not the loud shouting matches, not the obvious attacks. No. The real battle is fought in the quiet erosion of your soul, the slow wearing down of your joy, your confidence, your sense of direction. And if you're not careful, you'll blame yourself for that weight you're carrying, never realizing it was being put on you little by someone close. And what makes it so subtle, so dangerous, is that the person causing it may also be the same one who comforts you after the damage is done. That's how the cycle continues. They create the fire, then hand you the water. And in doing so, they become necessary to your survival. That's not love. That's a trap. That's entanglement. And demons specialize in entanglements. William Branham talked about spirits in atmospheres. He said you can feel the presence of something even when nothing's been said. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You walk into a room after that person's arrived and something's off. You can't explain it, but the peace is gone. You were fine all day. Then one phone call, one visit, and suddenly you're heavy. You're angry, you're discouraged. That's not coincidence. That's atmosphere. Spirits carry atmospheres with them. And when someone has opened the door to darkness in their own life, whether through unforgiveness, bitterness, addiction, or pride, they begin to carry that darkness into yours. You need to stop ignoring that shift. Stop brushing off those inner alarms. That sick feeling in your gut, that spiritual exhaustion after the interaction, it's telling you something. It's not paranoia. It's discernment. And too many people dismiss that inner warning system because the person causing the chaos is family, or because they've been friends for years, or because they don't want to seem unloving or judgmental. But listening, protecting your peace is not judgment, it's wisdom. And if you don't start recognizing the patterns, the same people will keep draining you, and you'll keep calling it loyalty. You'll keep sacrificing your clarity for the sake of appearances. And over time, that cost adds up. The enemy is subtle, but he's not original. He uses the same tactics: distraction, confusion, emotional exhaustion. Why? Because if he can wear you out, he can wear you down. And once you're worn down, you'll accept things you never would have tolerated in your right mind. So the next time you feel that invisible weight after someone leaves, the next time you notice your peace walk out when a certain person walks in, pause. Pay attention. You might be standing next to someone who's not walking alone. Now, let's go even deeper, because if darkness hides itself, then you have to know the masks it wears. And one of the most common, most dangerous masks is manipulation, not the kind that shouts or forces. No, the real thing is subtle. It's psychological. It's spiritual. It's the voice that speaks kindly while taking your strength. It's the hand that comforts you while quietly binding you. And often it comes through people who appear to love you. You've got to understand, demons don't always come with threats. Sometimes they come with gifts. Sometimes they wrap chains in affection. That's why so many people stay in toxic cycles, not because they don't see something is wrong, but because they're emotionally entangled with the person causing it. And the tool used to maintain that entanglement is manipulation. This spirit knows how to twist love into obligation. It knows how to play the victim when you set a boundary. It knows how to guilt you with what it once did for you while completely ignoring what it's doing now. It knows how to shift blame so you end up apologizing when they were the one who violated your peace. That's not just dysfunction. That's deception. That's strategy. And it's spiritual. You've got to recognize the playbook. First, it flatters, then it hooks, then it drains, then it blames. This cycle repeats over and over, and every time you try to get free, they remind you of how much they've done for you or how no one else will care like they do. That's not love. That's control. Love frees. Manipulation enslaves. William Branham once said, "The Holy Spirit leads, the devil drives." That's the difference. A person operating in light will lead you with truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A person influenced by darkness will drive you, using fear, guilt, or charm to keep you in a place where they remain in control. One gives you choice. The other corners you with emotions. Now let's be clear. Many of these people don't even realize they're being used. That's what makes it so hard. You want to believe their intentions are pure. And maybe in their conscious mind they are, but the spirit operating behind the scenes is something else entirely. That's why you've got to learn to look past the surface. Don't just ask, "What are they saying?" Ask, "What is this doing to me?" Because that's the real fruit, the outcome. If every conversation leaves you confused, if every request comes with pressure or guilt, if you can't say no without facing emotional punishment, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a manipulation web. And that web doesn't just tangle you physically. It drains you spiritually. It pulls you out of alignment with your identity, your calling, your peace. And if you're not careful, you'll spend years trying to fix something that was never meant to be yours to carry. Here's what's even more tragic. Many people pray about these kinds of relationships, asking God for strength to endure, when what they really need is the discernment to step back. Not every relationship is a test. Some are a trap, and discernment is knowing the difference. Now, maybe you've been told that walking away is selfish. Maybe someone convinced you that unconditional love means unconditional access. But hear me, love does not equal permission. You can love someone and still guard your spirit. You can forgive someone and still refuse to be manipulated again. And in fact, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is disconnect so both of you can face the truth. So don't be fooled by smiles and soft voices. Don't be seduced by history or guilt or charm. Pay attention to the pattern and pay attention to what it's doing to your soul. Because no matter how beautiful the mask, the spirit behind it will always tell the truth, if you're willing to look. There's something else you have to watch for if you're going to spot these spirits hiding in the people around you. And that's the rejection of accountability. You see, darkness can't survive in the light of truth. The moment truth shows up, it demands a response. And when someone is being used by a spirit they don't want to confront, that spirit will always fight back when accountability enters the room. Not with fists, but with deflection, distortion, and denial. It's not that these people don't know they've done wrong. Often they do, but they've become so entangled with the lie, so wrapped up in the identity, they've built to protect themselves, that truth becomes a threat to their survival. And so, instead of facing it, they twist it. They bend it. They make themselves the victim in the story where they were the one doing the damage. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe it. The mind is a powerful thing, and so is pride. When a person has made a home for pride in their spirit, they will go to great lengths to avoid accountability. They'll shift blame onto others. They'll reframe situations in their favor. They'll minimize their actions while magnifying yours. And in the end, you'll walk away from the conversation doubting yourself, even when you came in knowing exactly what happened. That's not miscommunication. That's manipulation rooted in a spirit that cannot tolerate the truth, because truth exposes. Truth breaks illusions. Truth burns through the fog of charm and excuses. And when a demon is hiding behind someone's personality, the last thing it wants is to be exposed by light. William Branham often spoke about the light of God, revealing what was hidden. He said you could walk into a room with all the right theology, all the right appearances. But if the spirit of truth wasn't welcome there, then whatever was hiding would stay hidden. And that's exactly what we see in people who consistently reject accountability. They may say the right things. They may even confess a sin or admit a fault. But the moment real, lasting change is required, they vanish. They deflect. Or worse, they retaliate. And you've probably seen this yourself. You confront someone gently, carefully with truth, and somehow the entire conversation turns around, and suddenly you're the one being interrogated. Or they start bringing up your past, changing the subject, crying, yelling, anything but sitting with the actual issue. That's not just emotional immaturity. That's spiritual resistance. Something inside them cannot face the mirror without rage or retreat. But here's the danger. If you continue to engage with people who cannot face truth, they will slowly wear you down until you start doubting truth itself. You'll start questioning whether you're being too harsh or expecting too much. And over time, you'll find yourself adjusting to their dysfunction, making room for it, explaining it, absorbing it, until your own sense of right and wrong becomes foggy. That's exactly where the enemy wants you, in confusion. Because confusion is the soil where deception grows. And deception, when left unchecked, gives demons legal ground to move freely, right in your home, right in your relationships. So if you want to see what kind of spirit a person is operating under, don't just listen to their prayers or their praises. Watch how they respond to truth. Do they own it? Do they humble themselves? Do they grow from it? Or do they attack it, hide from it, and twist it? Accountability is the threshold. It's the line in the sand. Those who walk in the light cross it, no matter how painful. Those who serve another master avoid it at all costs. A heart that refuses truth is a doorway wide open to deception. And deception, once rooted, will fight to the death to protect itself. Now, here's a hard truth, one that most people don't want to hear, and fewer are willing to face. When demonic influence is present in someone's life, one of the clearest signs is the inversion of light. That is, what is good begins to look bad. And what is bad starts being treated like it's acceptable, even normal. It's a reversal, a distortion of spiritual order. And if you're not grounded in truth, you'll get swept right into it. We're living in a time where darkness doesn't just hide. It presents itself as wisdom. It cloaks itself in progressive thinking or emotional reasoning or keeping the peace. But underneath all that, the fruit is still rotten. And you'll know it by this simple test. When someone mocks the good in you, when they resist your growth, when they ridicule your desire to walk in integrity, to set boundaries, to pray more, to speak less, to live clean. That is not just a personality clash. That's spiritual warfare. This is how it works. You begin to rise. You start setting standards. You're walking toward light, healing from trauma, cutting off toxic habits, getting serious about your purpose. And suddenly, the people closest to you feel offended. They start making jokes. They act like you're too deep or too strict. They miss the old you, the one they could control, the one who stayed small so they could stay comfortable. And what you're really seeing is that their spirit is being agitated by your growth. Because hear me, when light shows up, anything unclean has to make a decision. It will either humble itself and repent, or it will harden and attack. And most of the time, the attack doesn't come through open confrontation. It comes through subtle inversion. You become the problem for having boundaries. You're too much for calling out lies. You're not loving because you won't tolerate confusion anymore. That's not disagreement. That's inversion. That's when good is labeled evil, and evil is normalized until you stop recognizing it for what it is. William Branham once said, "When a man walks in the light of God, his very presence convicts the sinner." Not because he's preaching, not because he's condemning, but because light exposes. And that exposure is uncomfortable to those who have made peace with the dark. So ask yourself, what happens when you start living righteously around certain people? Do they get inspired, or do they get irritated? Do they move closer to the light with you? Or do they start finding ways to bring you back down? That's not random. That's a revelation. And sometimes it's the only one you need. Philosophers have long understood that truth is not just a matter of facts. It's a matter of alignment. You either live in harmony with the truth or in resistance to it. And when someone is out of alignment for long enough, their perception becomes warped. That's when they start celebrating rebellion and criticizing order. That's when dishonor becomes funny, when purity becomes weakness, when holiness becomes outdated. That's not just cultural, it's spiritual blindness. And spiritual blindness isn't neutral, it's dangerous. If you keep close company with people who have inverted their values, over time, your own compass starts to shift. You'll start excusing what you once rejected. You'll start second guessing what you once knew deep in your spirit. And before long, you'll be calling compromise, maturity, and fear wisdom. That's the power of inversion. It doesn't just attack your behavior. It reprograms your discernment. So stay awake. Stay rooted. When you start seeing the lines between good and evil getting blurred, don't stand still. Back up. Test the fruit. Listen to the patterns. And when someone repeatedly mocks the light in you, take that as the warning it is. By now, if you followed everything we've covered, how demons hide in behavior, how they drain, manipulate, invert truth, and reject accountability, you might be asking, how do I really know when I'm dealing with one? Not just a difficult personality, not just someone having a bad day, but something deeper, something darker. And the truth is, logic alone won't always give you the answer, because not every spirit announces itself in obvious ways. Evil doesn't always shout. It whispers. It blends in. It mimics the language of love, of kindness, of even spirituality. And if you're only relying on the surface, on what makes sense in your mind, you'll miss what's happening in your spirit. That's why this final point may be the most important one of all. You must learn to discern spiritually, not just logically. William Branham taught that True discernment is a gift of the Holy Spirit. It's a supernatural awareness, a knowing that comes before the evidence, before the facts line up, before the lie is even spoken. It's that still small voice that says, something here is wrong. Even when everything looks right, even when everyone else is clapping, agreeing, trusting, following. Something in your gut, in your spirit, says no. And that no is often the only warning you'll get. Now, that kind of discernment doesn't come from reading books or going to church alone. It comes from staying close to truth itself, from aligning your life so tightly with what is real, what is righteous, what is clean, that when something counterfeit walks into the room, it clashes with your spirit. You don't need to have a full explanation. You just need to feel the dissonance and trust it. That's the part people struggle with, because we live in a world that glorifies reason. That teaches you to doubt your intuition, especially if it makes people uncomfortable. We've been trained to value appearances over essence, to give the benefit of the doubt when our spirit is already screaming. And as a result, we walk straight into traps we could have avoided if we had just listened to that quiet voice that told us something was off. This is where many miss it. They ask, but where's the proof? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm judging too quickly? And the enemy loves that, because by the time the proof shows up, the damage is often done. That's why discernment is given to prevent, not just to respond, to protect you before the fruit has even had time to fully grow. And here's the sobering part. Sometimes you'll discern something about a person that you don't want to believe, because it's someone you love, someone you trust, someone who's helped you. But the spirit in them has changed. Maybe they let something in. Maybe they never dealt with what was hidden, and now it's being projected onto you. And the longer you ignore what your spirit is showing you, just to keep the relationship intact, the more ground the enemy gains. So ask yourself, what has God already shown me that I've talked myself out of? What gut instinct, what spiritual nudge have I silenced just because I didn't want to face the consequences of seeing the truth? Discernment is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. When the Spirit shows you something, you're not just supposed to notice. You're supposed to act. That doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it just means distance, boundaries, clarity, prayer. But it always means alignment, choosing truth even when it costs you comfort.